kick off our travel-free PD than the master of summarizing educational articles for busy principals than Kim Marshall. We're excited about having Kim with us today. Kim, welcome back to MoASSP. The last time we spoke was at the 85th Annual Fall Conference here in Columbia, Missouri. Kim, you provided a general session before a packed house and did a very popular post-conference for us as well. Today, Kim is going to share his insight and what he has seen nationwide in terms of school reopening. But first,
greetings. Good to be with you, although not really with you. No travel in my schedule for a while or for yours. Virtual PD is the name of the game. So just on my children, they're both sweating out, as many of you are, I'm sure, what is going to happen in the fall, what their schools are going to do, partial, remote, and so forth. Boston Public Schools, where our daughter and son-in-law teach, are still making up their minds. Our son's school in Seattle is partial at this point, and everyone is having a pretty miserable summer, sort of sweating this out. My wife is in the State Department of Education here in Massachusetts, and she's the legal counsel advising a rather frazzled commissioner here, as I'm sure your commissioner is too. So a lot of us are just going through a lot of stuff here, and this hour with you, and I'm glad you were able to join, is about not about the masks and the hand sanitizers and the physical spacing, which are all incredibly important and are going to get worked out. This is more on the educational side of things. So let me share my screen. I got some slides here, and let's sort of give you a sense of what the agenda is here. So you muted your microphones, but with a small group, we can definitely chime in, unmute your microphone. We're going to record this. We're going to record, I hope, so you can share it with. Yes, you said that. And you might want to turn off your camera because of bandwidth issues. So here's the outline. I want to check in first, which is real important, and modeling that. And then my three big buckets are what we've learned and can do better based on the pandemic experience. Gearing up in the weeks before school opens, which is coming up real soon for a lot of you. And then when school actually opens, what things. So just hats off to everybody for what's happened in the last 5 months. The way people have risen to the occasion here, turned around on a dime, figured out in a matter of days how to handle this remote instruction, especially people with kids at home. Our daughter has 2 young children at home, and that was a real juggling act for her, and a lot of you have gone through that. And then people have lost family members or colleagues. A principal I was talking to in New York that lost 2 colleagues to COVID, actually died. And so there's a lot of emotional stuff going on here. And then on top of that, we have the racial reawakening that's happened in our country, and we're all in the middle of that. So just a huge amount emotionally and substantively and professionally going on, and it's amazing that we're dealing with it, that we're all still standing. Here's a quote I picked up for the memo a few weeks ago. The pandemic is one season in our lives. It will end. It will be remembered as an extraordinarily difficult time, but the slow process of returning to a new normal, of naming our grief, helping one another reach acceptance and finding meaning will continue. And I'm optimistic that by this time next year, by next summer, we will be out of the woods and we will be looking forward to a relatively normal school year following up. But this coming year is a doozy. And we're all sort of thinking about that. So can everyone please grab your cell phone? I'm going to be using Poll Everywhere a number of times during this hour to check in with you in a couple of ways. So go to your texting function, hit as if you're going to send a new text to somebody, and put 37607 in the to box. So that's who you're sending it to, 37607 in the to box. And then go to the message box. So the message you're going to send is Kim Marshall 346. And don't worry about capitals, it's not case sensitive. So 37607 in the to box, Kim Marshall 346 in the message box, and then hit send. So go ahead and do that. I'll give you time here because this is a neat way, and I want to model this particular software, which is the best one for integrating polling questions, a variety of polling questions into an actual PowerPoint presentation, which a lot of teachers and administrators can use or are using. So when you've hit 37607 in the to box, Kim Marshall 346 in the message box, and hit send, you should get an immediate response saying you're part of the group. So any questions or concerns about that before we move on? I want to make sure to give you time. I was in a presentation a while ago where they rushed this, and I was so frustrated and I wasn't part of the group. Any questions or concerns so far? Just unmute yourself and speak up, right, for late arrival. So here's the first question. just to see how this is working and if it's working. So what is your role? If you can just put in the letter, and it's probably going to be B. I'm going to do that here, and then hit send with your texting function. And that's my response coming in. And now we have some others coming in. So the way Polar works, it comes in real time. So even though we're 1,000 miles apart here, in real time, we're getting responses to this question. And you'll see a couple of other types of questions as we go along. Okay, so so now we have a different type of polling question. 2 words describing your state of mind. So one could be positive. And of course, the way these things work, when one is mentioned more than once, like anxious, it gets bigger. So 2 words describing your state of mind. And if you're arriving late, go to the chat box, the top of the chat box, and you'll see the instructions for getting your cell phone to texting function on your cell phone to be able to respond to the questions, because there are going to be more of them. So take another 15 seconds here, get your responses in. Looks like anxious, stress, excited, and anxious are the 3 biggies, followed by nervous. And then we got frazzled, ready, frantic, and overwhelmed. So excited, that's a very positive word. It's great to see that word up here. Okay, so I'm going to send to Doug after we get finished 3 summaries from the Marshall Memo. One of them goes way back about leading in difficult times. And the first one is my favorite. Can a leader admit confusion and still lead? Because that is actually a humbling and an effective strategy of leadership if it's accompanied by outreach and then, and decisive action. So I'm going to send the Marshall Memo summaries to these, or you can find them in the archive if you want to look to, or in the book. So these are great articles about leadership. So now your personal preference about how you think your school should be opening in the fall. So wait for the letters to pop up here, and then you're going to key in your personal choice here. Once you read them while we're waiting for the letters here. These are the options that American schools are looking at. Actually, schools around the world are looking at as we come into the next phase of this pandemic here. You got to see the letters for the choices to be live here. Your school's #1 issue at this point. What is the #1 thing on your mind for your school or your school district? What are the things? Think of 1 or 2 words. It could be a bright spot, or it could be your biggest concern. So just #1 issue that you're thinking about now. And now we're going to do another word splash here. So go ahead and key them in and move on. So, so this is my first bucket, what we've learned and can do better. So despite the trauma that we've been through, there are some things that have come out of this pandemic that are actually pretty positive. So here's the first one, is we have invented a new way of communicating content. And this young woman, Chloe Langford, I forget which state she was in, did this performance of herself playing about 4 different instruments, singing a song that she composed all day long. If you haven't seen this one, it's just tremendously charming. This young lady just did a great job with it. So here's taking it up a notch. The EL schools, the Expeditionary Learning Schools around the country, I think there are about 150 of them, they put together a musical performance with all kinds of instruments. See the young lady there using scissors as a percussion instrument, and they were able to somehow coordinate. This is an entirely new art form. This is something completely new that we didn't do before, and we are going to keep doing it after the pandemic is over. You may have seen James Corden with the Muppets. If you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out on YouTube. Singing with a little help from my friends. Absolutely delightful. And then taking it up 1 more notch, here's the Juilliard musicians, including a few heavy hitters like Yo-Yo Ma and others playing Bolero online. Again, you can find this on YouTube. This is a new art form. So this is kind of neat that we discovered this. And then there are discussions, serious discussions like Oprah with a number of African-American intellectuals, politicians and ministers, and journalists talking about where do we go from here on the race issue. So a new art form. So here's my list of 11 things, and I'm adding to this list all the time. I got a pad of paper here if we want to add when we discuss these. So this is my list, but let me take these one at a time. The first one is middle and high schools starting later, because during the pandemic, a whole bunch of high school kids have been getting enough sleep for the first time in years. So my daughter's secondary school starts at 7:15 in the morning, and they haven't decided to change yet, but I hope a lot of schools around the country are reflecting after the pandemic about school start times, middle and high schools starting later. And you know the research from Minnesota and around the country that no middle and high school should start earlier than 8:30 in the morning. Now, maybe a little late for this year, but again, this is one of our big takeaways, is the instructional, the personal, the car safety, all the other issues that get better when kids get more sleep, when adolescents get more sleep. Second one is team collaboration. So I've got a photo here of an in-person team. But one thing that has happened during the pandemic is that educators have had to collaborate more closely at a distance, and they've gotten better at it. The feedback that I'm seeing in the memo and from people that I know in schools is that team meetings, so-called PLCs, have actually strengthened during the pandemic out of necessity. People have gotten better at reaching out to families. People have a coordinated person, a point person in the school that reaches out to families, so families aren't inundated. So team collaboration is going to be better when we come back together. Third one on my list is when in-person instruction is really essential. You remember this scene from Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams, God bless him, just mesmerizing his kids. This is the kind of thing that can only be done in person. And I think we have a higher consciousness now about the things that we must do in person, and then the things that are actually more efficient remotely, like small groups working on Google Hangouts, people doing field trips, people doing other kinds of things that don't lend themselves, do not necessitate in-person instruction. So I think that division of labor between what's in person. Now, of course, we had flipped classrooms in the past, and we've had ingenious teachers that have made videos that the kids watch at home remotely, rewatch them as many times as they want to. And then in class is more of an interactive discussion. But I think the pandemic has raised our consciousness about when we do which, and which is more appropriate. So checking for understanding. So this is a low-tech in-person check for understanding. Okay, so you can see these dry erase boards in a high school math class, and you can see the kids that don't have it right. So what's the teacher's next move at this point? Maybe find someone with a different answer than you, discuss your differences, see if you can arrive at a consensus, then we come back together. But the pandemic, again, with remote instruction, people have had to do a better job at checking for understanding, using polling, using other software packages. Polarbrewer is only one of several that are available. And I think our consciousness, again, has been raised about the need for check for understanding. I have to say the weakest thing that I see when I visit classrooms with principals, and I do a lot of that, I've done that over the last 18 years, is checking for understanding by saying, any questions? You're all good with that? And then moving on, because kids are embarrassed to speak up. So I think, again, our consciousness has been raised, and this is one thing that I really advocate that principals take very seriously in their classroom visits, is there robust checking for understanding, whatever method is used, preferably the whole class responding, like these kids here, so that we can see everyone. Okay, differentiation has been an obsession of mine for years because it lays a trip on teachers and it can be exhausting if it's done wrong. So I think, again, because we've been remote, we've had to rethink this. And I think the old way of thinking about differentiation, content, process, and product is outdated. And I advocate having teachers and supervisors think about differentiation with these three questions. What should students be learning in this class? So as I plan this class as a teacher, this algebra class or world history class, what should they be learning? Okay, what are the learning objectives here? And preferably for the unit. Then what are the best ways of learning? What are the best learning experiences to get this content across? Is it a movie? Is it a visiting speaker? Is it a virtual field trip? Is it a lecture? There's time for lectures. So choosing the best learning modality and then checking for understanding, really seeing are all kids learning? Those, I think, are the best questions to think about differentiation. And we've been forced to really think about these during the pandemic. So as a teacher does these three things, they've got to balance their energy and creativity so they don't get exhausted because of these three things. So we got to front load instruction. We got to think through, what do I want the kids to learn, and plan a UDL, Universal Design for Learning lesson that gives as many kids access to this learning. Okay, then we got to execute the lesson. And I chose this picture because it really shows a teacher who is who is nimble, who's around there solving learning problems in real time in the classroom. And then there's got to be the follow-up, often by teacher teams, looking at data, looking at exit tickets, looking at tests and prompts and performance tasks, and figuring out what's our next move here. How do we follow up with the kids who didn't learn? So differentiation, different take on this. I do have an article about this, which you can find on the Memo website if you want to look for it. It says, so what about touch keyboarding? Again, if kids have increasingly during the pandemic had to communicate via laptops, via computers, isn't it a tremendously important skill for them to be able to touch keyboard, to be able to touch type at speed without looking at the keyboard, getting away from hunting and pecking. I think 5th, 6th, 7th grade is an ideal time to learn this, but it's never too late to getting away from hunting and pecking. I think this is a critical life skill, again, highlighted by the pandemic. And if you don't already have a course, it used to be called typing, now it's called keyboarding. If you don't already have this in your school, think about going forward. Like, can you get kids up to speed? And they're wonderful computer programs. Mario teaches typing, all these other programs. I was in a school in Newark, New Jersey years ago that had the keyboard in their computer lab painted over so the kids could not see the kids, and it forced them to learn how to touch type. Tremendously important skill. Projects and experiential learning. Sorry for this elementary photo here for you all high school folks, but just the point is hands-on learning when it's appropriate. Projects, experiential learning. Now that we've been frustrated for months of not being in person, when we come back together, we've got to maximize these hands-on experiences. Comments and not grades on assessments. So one of the killers and one of the discouraging things for teachers is when they take a lot of time putting comments and then they give a grade and all the kids look at is the grade. So the strong advice I'm hearing from the assessment people is don't give grades, A, B, C, D, F, or 100 points on a 100 scale, but actually give comments and get the kids reading the comments. Really, really important sort of insight, again, highlighted by the pandemic. Inviting in visiting speakers remotely. A class in Seattle has invited in a number of interesting politicians, activists, artists, leaders coming into his class. And when we're back to normal, we'll do more of this because we don't have to pay airfare or honorariums. We can get all kinds of people who are delighted to join in. My 10th one is one of my real obsessions now. So if careful readers of the Marshall Memo may recall that a couple months ago, a young lady in New York City, an 8th grade student named Veronique Mintz, wrote a scathing op-ed piece in the New York Times talking about how she loved remote learning because in her real classes, in her 8th grade New York City public school, the kids were out of control, rolling around on the floor, hitting each other, getting into fights, disrespecting the teacher. And my reaction to that was, okay, remote learning is working for this young lady, but what about those classrooms? Why wasn't the principal of that school in those classrooms helping those teachers improve their classroom management? So I think one of the big things, again, a spotlight shown by the pandemic, is that mediocre and poor teaching is going on out there in schools, and principals need to get out of their offices, department heads, assistant principals, instructional coaches get into classrooms, and if they see mediocre and poor practices, help those teachers get better, because teachers desperately want to get better. They're not in love with teaching that way. So again, this is one of those insights, getting out of our offices. And the last one, and this is particularly germane for high schools, is the big picture goal that's been made very clear during the pandemic. It's all about independence. It's all about self-sufficiency. It's all about kids being able to operate on their own. Some kids have not done well at this during the pandemic. We've lost some kids. We haven't. And so we've got to get kids, have this as a big macro goal of schools in mind all the time. It's all about self-sufficiency and independence. And think about when kids go to college, how many kids fall apart in college because they are not used to being independent. So particularly at the high school, one of those big goals is how can we get kids to be more self-sufficient? So here are these 11 things that I've rolled through, and I'm open to adding a 12th or a 13th or your comments on these. So think about these. What would be your highest priorities in terms of going back, the main lessons that you've taken away from this era here? And let's see if we can get some letters here. Come on, letters. Yep, there they are. Okay, now it's working again. So what would be just, again, enter the letter and hit send for any letter that's something that would be on your priority list, big lessons that you've learned from the pandemic. And those of you who've come in late, go to the chat box. At the top of the chat box are the instructions for using your cell phone's texting feature to be able to respond to these questions that we'll be asking. So just hit the letter and hit send for any that would be on your priority list. Yeah, we got some other ones coming in here. Let's take your time, and you can hit as many as you want, just the letter and then hit send on your cell phone's texting function. Wow, the biggest vote getter so far has been differentiation. And if you want a good article on that, I will recommend mine. I did a lot of thinking about this. I tried to write it years ago, hit the wall, came back to it, and Kaplan published this article in the Marshall Memo archive. Just go to marshallmemo.com. On the left side, hit Kim's published writing, scroll down to classroom, and you'll see that article. I think it's a big bugaboo for a lot of teachers. Just they feel like they're being asked to do a separate lesson for every kid, which is impossible. What are some others? Let's see, checking for understanding, polling. Are teachers using some kind of polling function? And it could even be a low-tech thing, like you saw at the dry erase boards. Okay, let's move on here. Interesting insights here. So the Marshall Memo, I think all of you are getting it, but if you're not for some reason, email me. I'm giving free subscriptions during the pandemic. And I have put together a collection of every article relating to the pandemic, ideas and resources so far. So this is on the Memo website, and these are the categories you can zip through here. So they're quotes, they're articles about understanding the pandemic, they're articles about the human side. The fifth one there is planning for school reopening, videos, graphics, and my own teaching materials. So all of these are available the document is now 75 pages long, but you can zip around in it. So my second bucket, actually, let's pause here. I'm sorry. Let's pause and look at these responses here, and any comments, questions, suggestions, things that are not on my list, or things that particularly resonate with you from this. Actually, why don't I go back to the previous slide here to the 11 things that I talked about. And Doug or Clark, if you want to chime in, or if anyone wants to unmute yourself, I'd love to hear your comments, thoughts so far. Anything missing from this list? Something that should be on here, things we've learned from the pandemic that we can do better when we get back.
Well, I think one of the things that you talked about, Kim, was better collaboration. I think that's, you would think that being remote, that might have taken a hit, but really, I think that there are excellent exemplars around the state of Missouri that we've heard, Doug and I have heard from principals on how they have enhanced, this whole time has enhanced their efforts to collaborate with staff and students and even parents.
Especially those lonely singletons. Maybe there's one physics teacher in a high school, learning that he or she can collaborate with other physics teachers around the state and actually have live chats, or asynchronous, but probably live. To our next bucket here, which is what are the things we need to do before students begin? So when staff is together, but the students haven't arrived or started yet. And the first thing is checking in with colleagues. And again, there are going to be three categories of people walking into our schools or joining our faculties. One is going to be people who are inconvenienced by the pandemic, but for whom it wasn't life-threatening or really traumatic. Okay, so they missed going to restaurants, they missed going to movies, ball games, and so forth, but they weren't really hurt by it. And the second category is going to be people who got sick themselves, people who actually got COVID-19 and got sick and recovered. So they're a little more traumatized, a little more upset about this. May have family members or colleagues. And the third category is people who actually knew people who died. And so three levels of emotional response to this. And it's really going to be important to check in. And I know this is on everyone's list here, is to check in with colleagues and just see how people are doing. Second one is hiring. I don't know how many of you have had resignations, people who have taken early retirement or simply retired or left the profession because of how difficult this has been, or the dread at looking forward to the year ahead. And so there are going to be vacancies, and hiring the right people. And again, the Marshall Memo archive has got, it's a part of your free subscription, it's got a wonderful collection of articles on hiring if you go into the archive. The other thing is tutors. So there are going to be college kids who graduate and take, or high school kids who graduate and take a gap year, haven't got a job or haven't got a college yet, and want to do some good national service. And I can't think of a more important form of national service at this point than tutoring in schools, whether it's remotely or in person, going in and helping those kids who've fallen behind, because we're going to have a heck of a lot of that as we come into this school year. So good hiring of teachers, other staff members, and tutors. Third thing is looping. This is less common in high schools, but I do know high schools, German high schools in particular, do a lot of looping, is teachers keeping the same kids for 2 years in a row. Now, it may happen naturally with a math teacher who teaches at 2 different levels, but if we can maximize the relationship continuity that comes from teachers working with kids for 2 years in a row. If there's ever been a time when looping is going to be relevant, it's this coming year, coming out of this crazy spring where we were remote for 3 or 4 months and coming into a year where we may be remote too. So the more relationships we have from the past, the better. Fourth thing on my list here is teacher teamwork. So Clark just talked about this. Principals and department heads being strategic in putting together teams where those hidden leaders, those people who weren't very outspoken before, have revealed themselves. Lonely singletons, as I just mentioned, physics teachers, music teachers, German teachers, teachers who are the only teacher in their school, taking advantage of this technology that we've gotten so good at in the last few months, and forming good teams and collaborating in the year ahead, because collaboration is going to be the name of the game. Fifth one on my list is power standards. If ever there was a time when we need to be very clear about what the priority standards for the year are, the 2021 year is that. So Marie Kondoing the curriculum, like throwing out the stuff that is less important, that gives us less joy maybe, and focusing on the year ahead. And this is, I think, one of the most important jobs we've got to take on before school starts, is prioritizing the curriculum for the months ahead. Then, of course, there's PD. And helping those teachers who really did a good job at this, who figured out the technology, who figured out how to teach remotely, helping them help their colleagues, having good PD sharing before school starts. So everyone is up to speed on this. The next to last one is finding those lost students. Every school that I've been in contact with has had some kids that they lost. They never engaged with remote instruction. Why weren't they? How can we get them back on board? Maybe they moved in with grandparents out of state. Maybe they are embarrassed about their home. Maybe they don't have internet connection. And that leads us to the last one on the list, which is making sure that every single kid has good, strong internet connection and enough devices in the home so that they can actually engage in instruction if they're going to be remote or even partially remote. The new thinking about broadband is it's like electricity and water and sewer systems. It's something that everyone should have. It should be just a basic right. So those are that's my list here. So looking at that list, what would be your 3 top priorities? Again, use your cell phone to your texting function to type in a letter and then hit send for each that would be your top 3 priorities of the list that I just went through. And then we can reflect on whether there's anything missing from my list. Again, you have 3 choices with this one. So type the letter, hit send. So take another 15 seconds here, get your 3 choices in, and then let's look at what we got here. So the one that got the most votes here was finding lost students. And that might be a door-to-door enterprise. It might really be a question of getting out into the community, using every possible avenue to find out who those students were. Well, we know who they were, why they were not connected, and what we can do to get them back instructionally. Next one is we had power standards and sharing effective practices, or a high priority for 5 people each, and then checking in with colleagues, a big emotional thing. Nobody for looping. Again, these may be so obvious that people don't put them on their priority list. So let's pause here, and any additional things that you think should be, obviously safe opening, is on everyone's list, but anything else that should be on this list, or any comments or questions about the things that we've been talking about here?
Kim, we might ask if those on the call today, if any ideas on how or strategies in finding lost students. Now, you said going, door to door, but are there other ways that maybe some of our folks that are on the call that they are considering?
Great question. Let's just unmute yourself. We got a small group here. Unmute yourself and chime in with any ideas you have on that one.
This is Robert. I'm at Lathrop High School. We're a pretty small district, 300 kids in the high school. So what my staff and I are going to do is we're going to make a Google form or Google spreadsheet. And if a teacher is starting to have concerns about a particular student, they're just going to put their name down, and then we're going to start looking for, okay, is it more than one teacher with the same kid? Is it just one class for that kid? Is it several? And then we're going to have checklists, you reach out to the parents. And then at some point, does an administrator need to get involved? Does a counselor need to get involved? And it's really just phone calls. I'm not a big fan of email when it comes to trying to get in contact to get a kid engaged again. So there'll be a lot of phone calls being made during plan times or during my time, and trying to reach out to those parents. And we usually have pretty good success when we make that connection verbally. So
those are great techniques. Probably also texting might be a way too.
Right. We do have a lot of parents that like to text, so that will be probably something that I'll probably do.
Great. Any other ideas from the group? We got 11 people on here. Any other thoughts about finding those lost students?
One of the things that we had done am I coming through?
Yep, hear you.
Okay, perfect. One of the things that we had done last semester that we realized was really integral, and it kind of goes with what Robert was saying, we actually developed a communication log system where when staff would try to make communications, they would be able to dump that into a central point, and then other staff would be able to see and access what communications had been made for any student. Because what we were finding was this person would try this way, this person would try that way, and we had to quit beating the same path. If we were contacting grandma and grandma was getting nowhere, we were frustrating grandma by 4 different teachers contacting grandma. And so we had to stop that. And so what we did is we basically were able to implement that to where a teacher could go on and see what attempts had been made. And if we found something successful, we posted it there, like a cell number. Like sometimes it was actually reaching out to those kids. I allowed staff under these circumstances to use various forms of social media in an effort to just try to reach lost students, because we felt making that connection was more critical than anything. And when we were finally able to make those connections, we were able to document that. The other thing that really helped us is it helped us understand when we were getting desperate. When we had made those communications and we saw 6 different efforts of 6 different people and the child still remained lost, we still weren't getting anything back, then we were able to engage our school home coordinator or our SRO to do, as you talked about, Mr. Marshall, one of those house visits or something like that to reach out to make sure that we were getting eyes on the child. And we really found that early on we were kind of in a disarray of all that information, and centralizing that information and building a system that enabled our staff to be able to report that was hugely critical in finding those lost students. And once they were found, a lot of times, they weren't lost again. We'd figured it out. It was kind of like the key to the chest, so to speak.
Wow. So Chris, you need to give a national workshop on what you just said. That is absolutely exemplary, especially this idea of a central repository of information, because grandma just gets ticked off at the school when she's contacted 4 times. So all in one place, persistence. I heard a lot of persistence there. You're just not giving up. You're just keeping on it. Fabulous stuff. Thank you so much.
And the other thing that we were
any other thoughts, comments? Go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to say the other positive for our staff was it gave us something that we could really compliment them on. When we were seeing, like through emails, phones, all that, maybe 300 contacts a day. me or my assistant were able to send out an email to staff complimenting them for the great work that day and communicating, because we actually had a measurable means now as well of really recognizing the exceptional work that we were doing as a team.
To kind of go along with what Chris was
Great.
saying,
Fabulous.
I even went as far as we have group emails for each different grade level. And so with our seniors, you know, we're getting close to graduating, and I had a few kids that were lost. And so I actually sent out an email to the whole group of seniors. And I said, hey, does anybody have this student's cell number? I need to reach out to them. And I had friends of these kids that actually took the time to reach out to me to give me that contact information. And sometimes I would call parents and ask for it too. And I would call them. I'd leave a message. I'd follow it up with a text. And I saved every kid but one, so to graduate. So I felt like that helped a lot with some of these kids, that personal contact from the front office.
Yeah, yeah, and really, it says that we care. It says we're not giving up on them. This is important. You can do it, and we're not going to give up on you. Bucket here. Let me just get my thing working here. So the second one is when school actually begins. And I think the virtual hug of the kids, just we really missed you, and a big thank you to families is going to be really important. The second bullet here, helping people understand the pandemic. So a lot of people are really freaked out by this, of course, and don't have a good understanding of how it works. And I've really been watching in the memo for articles and videos that help kids visualize and help staff, but mostly kids visualize how this works. And when you think about it, it's very counterintuitive to a kid, even a sophisticated high school kid, to think that when they're talking, as I'm talking now, there actually are these aerosols, these viral particles coming out of my mouth. And if I have the COVID, and we don't know if I have it, you know, they're actually floating through the air. So how do you help a kid understand that who's skeptical of the science on this? Well, there was a wonderful video in last week's Marshall Memo where they used Petri dishes, and they had a man with and without a mask, coughing, singing, speaking, shouting, you know, all different kinds of expression. And then they put these Petri dishes into an oven, and it enhanced the particles that had come out. And you were able to see very graphically the difference between a mask and not a mask, the distance away from the person, the singing, the shouting, you know, the talking, and so forth. So just anything that helps kids understand this. There's also a wonderful article by a UMass, New Bedford, I think, professor here in Massachusetts called Aaron Bromage. His article went viral. Again, just helping people understand how the difference between being inside and outside, the difference in ventilation, how in a restaurant you can get this very, very quickly. So just, I think understanding is really important to people dealing with this. The third is doing a social emotional inventory to figure out where kids, parents, and teachers are at. And in this week's Marshall Memo, one of the last items, you're going to see that Panorama Education, the company that does surveys, has made a free social emotional survey available for different groups, for parents, for teachers, and for kids. And I really urge you to take advantage of this free survey. It's an online anonymous survey that can really help you right at the beginning of the year get a handle on the social emotional situation. Because again, you're going to have people all over the map. You're going to have people who are basically fine, and you're going to have people who are absolutely traumatized by deaths in their family and by other traumatic events. So you definitely use this survey, and Panorama's kind of beating everyone to it here with a free survey. Okay, the fourth one on my list here is assessment, is diagnostic assessment. So we know that a lot of kids are going to be behind. We know that especially kids who are out of touch, those lost kids are going to be way behind. They will have lost a lot of ground. And so teachers are going to want to do diagnostic assessments. And there's going to be a temptation to use commercial assessments, like NWEA and other companies are offering diagnostic assessments for free as a loss leader. I called two testing experts, Tom Gusky in Connecticut, Dylan William, who's a British researcher who's now in Florida, asked them for their advice on this, because I was troubled by this. We want diagnosis. And both of these men said, almost with the same words, don't use commercial assessments. First of all, they're not well aligned with state standards. Secondly, they're time consuming, and they ultimately get you hooked into their commercial products. Much better to have teachers do what they call range finding assessments. So a teacher's about to teach a unit on the Civil War, on quadratic equations, on French verbs, whatever it is. do a quick assessment, a teacher-made assessment that gives a sense of what the kids know and don't know. So as you go into the unit, you can actually key instruction, fill in gaps, scaffold, and so forth. So I think that's terrific advice. There have been a couple of articles really reinforcing this. Doug Reeves has been on this too. So now you might say, okay, our teachers are not assessment experts. Their assessments won't be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. Of course, when a teacher team puts an assessment together, when they collaborate across schools, that's even better. But the main thing is keep it informal, get information into teachers' hands quickly that's relevant for the curriculum that they're about to teach. Then decisions on student grouping. Once we know where kids are at, we may make decisions on grouping based upon the data that we got. Definitely, that's important. So then seeing September and October, whatever configuration you're in, seeing it as a full court press, just going gangbusters, and don't go backwards. I'm hearing this advice again and again. Don't try to go back to March, April, May, and June and fill in what wasn't taught. Go ahead with the curriculum and fill in as you go along, scaffold and fill in as you go along. So it's a full court press. We got to just pick up speed here, got to accelerate instruction. Next to last one is getting into classrooms. And again, this is my passion. I've written a book about this. I did a lot of this when I was a principal, is we can't let mediocre and poor instructional practices fly under the radar. We can't just do 1 or 2 teacher evaluations a year. We've got to get in on a regular basis. I love it when principals put an out of office message during the school day. I'm in classrooms, I'm in teacher team meetings. If it's urgent, here's a number to call, but otherwise I'm out there doing my job. We cannot allow what happened in that New York City 8th grade kid, in this case, of poor instructional practices happening day in, day out, especially since so many kids are going to be so far behind. And then the final thing is just ongoing faculty sharing and discussion, because you've got gems, you've got teachers who really rose to the occasion and figured this out, can really make it okay for them to share with their colleagues in all faculty discussion. So there is a technique that I never used as a principal, but that I've really gotten onto in the past, which is all faculty discussion of one Marshall Memo summary or other good article. But the beauty of Marshall Memo summaries is they're brief and they can run in 5 minutes. So here's the drill. Here's what and maybe some of you have done this already. Break people into groups, 3 or 4 in a group or 5. Give them a hard copy of the article if they're in person, or a soft copy, and have them read it in real time and underline and highlight what strikes them, what they agree with, what they disagree with. So everyone reads silently. I felt guilty as a principal having people read silently, but I've really gotten into this recently. So silent reading. Now you might say, why don't we have people read it beforehand? Well, you know the answer to that. In any human group, only about half of the people are actually going to do that because people are busy. So better to have them read it live, so everyone has just read this article at the same exact time. Then within each group, you do a protocol discussion. You go around, each person talks what they liked, what they didn't like, what they underlined, good quotes, and so forth. You go around, everyone speaks, and then the whole faculty comes back together and discusses what are the action implications of this for our school. So there are a number of Marshall Memo summaries that I've identified in the archive. They're right at the top of the topics list, 55 articles that lend themselves to this kind of all faculty discussion. Let me give you an example of one. So Jennifer Gonzalez, who's one of my favorite writers, wrote an article a few years ago about worksheets. Now, I don't know how you feel about worksheets, but she said some worksheets are absolute crap. And she called those busy sheets. But then she imagined a continuum from a busy sheet, which is a complete low-level waste of time, up to a power sheet, okay, a worksheet that really is provocative, that is great. It's an original source document, something that kids can sink their teeth into. So the article, which is a page and a half long, my summary of it, people read it, people go around, and then really the school discusses, okay, how are we doing on worksheets? How many of our worksheets are at that busy work end of the continuum? How many? Let's look at some examples. And so the outcome of this would be the whole staff has its consciousness raised about worksheets and begins to think more in terms of improving the quality. So that's just one example. And again, I've identified from all the memo articles so far, 55 that are like this, that lend themselves to this. So what's your reaction to this so far? So just read these choices here. And with your cell phone, just key in your feeling about the all faculty live article discussion idea. Yeah, so we got folks who've already done this. That's great. So just take 15 more seconds to get your responses in. So 4 of you say we're definitely going to try it when we get back to school. If you want to know how to find those articles that I've identified, so you go to marshallmemo.com, you key in, and Clark, confirm me here. I think it's Missouri in the email box and principals in the password box. Is that correct? Is that the login?
Yes, that is
I'm pretty
correct.
sure that's it.
In my URI.
Right. So you log in, and then you click Search Archive, and at the top of the topics list, the second one down, you're going to see all faculty discussion articles. Check that box, hit search, and all those articles will come up. They're sorted by topic, and you can just choose the articles that lend themselves to this. I think this is like a once a month activity, maybe. And we got articles about assessment, we got articles about memory, we got classroom management, and so forth, all kinds of good articles for that. So it looks like 5 of you at least want to try that. 3 of you are already doing it, maybe. And actually, let's pause here. Folks that have already done this, do you want to just unmute yourself and maybe share a particular article that was successful or a practice that was enhanced by doing this? Well, I'm hearing crickets here. We got a bunch of shy people out there in Missouri. I know how you all are out there. So idea, maybe it'll be helpful. So let's just pause here. We got a few more minutes. Any questions, comments, ideas, or suggestions and I'm going to unmute myself so we can see each other a little better here. We got a small group here, so unmute yourself, and if you want to chime in with anything, any questions, suggestions, or ideas on this whole question of coming back together. Details of it, I know that they do this every year. They make it available every year. So, I mean, if you went to, I think it's this week's Marshall Memo, right? The last item, maybe you can click on that and you can give us some real-time insights. I know that it's anonymous, it's online, it's free, and it asks questions, set of questions appropriate to the group, whether it's parents or teachers or students, to get data that can be used to get sort of a picture of what's going on in the school. I mean, I think the biggest question is trauma. You know, like how many kids are walking in like, you know, really hurting buckaroos here. You know, and then we got to figure out, because it's anonymous, we got to figure out who those kids are. But if anyone is online right now, maybe you can go ahead and click that link in today's, this week's memo. So it's Marshall Memo 848. I believe it's the last item. I don't have it in front of me. If someone want to click on it and give us some real-time info on the survey, it's going to be used for high stakes, you know, like graduation or grades and so forth. And it's got to be psychometrically sophisticated. You need to have multiple items, and you know, and maybe it has to be done by an expert. But again, for a teacher who's about to teach a unit, to be able to just do a quick check-in with kids, nothing very fancy, something they can score, maybe even in real time. I mean, if it's a polling question, but something they can score overnight, and they can say, okay, these kids have no idea about the Civil War. You know, we got to start from scratch here, or here are the gaps we got to fill in. So, but again, don't let, what's that expression? Don't let the great be the enemy of the good. Am I saying that right? That's doesn't have to be perfect.
While you're looking for that, Kim, I think for me, one of my biggest concerns is how to answer the question, you know, when you're talking about power standards, is if I have a math teacher, how important is it to get through every single Missouri learning standard in Algebra 1? Or are there certain standards that they should focus on? And, you know, what I don't want to happen is, just because maybe we're going to be on a hybrid schedule where we're doing an A/B day, that we're only getting through partial of the curriculum that we normally do. But I also don't want to overwhelm kids, and I don't want to overwhelm teachers. So I'm really struggling with how to answer that question to teachers as far as what do we need to cover in our class? Because we're a small district. It's not like I have 4 Algebra 1 teachers that can get together and discuss that question. It's going to be up to one person asking me my opinion, and that's it. So that's a concern for me.
But maybe you should take advantage of you know, Zoom or Google Hangouts to get those 4 algebra teachers together, because 4 heads are going to be smarter than 1. And again, Doug Reeves is the one who I think invented the term power standards a few years ago. And I'm trying to remember the criteria for a power standard. One of them is definitely, you know, standards. I mean, so what are the kids going to get tested on? Another one is, what are the teachers in the next course up want the kids to walk in with the next September? And so if you ask, you know, Algebra 2 teachers, you know, like what do you want from Algebra 1 course? What are give me the 10 things that you definitely want the kids to walk in within September 22. That's another source of information too. You might want to also Google power standards, but that's a dilemma because we're going to be short on time. It's not going to be ideal teaching conditions. We have to Marie Kondo the curriculum. But again, I would urge you to get those algebra teachers to reach out to other algebra teachers and put their heads together. And it isn't what they like to teach. It's what the kids really need to know. What are those top priorities? Power standards is a good word for that. Any other insights about how to help teachers identify those power standards?
I thought about on our first day back, you know, having maybe talk to the middle school principal and try to get 6th grade through 12th grade, say math teachers, and kind of start at the top, you know, my AP Calc, pre-calc teacher, and then trickle down on the things that they think the kid really needs to know coming into their class. Everybody have a copy of their Missouri Learning Standards, and then just kind of go all the way down through 6th grade as far as what is it are we going to teach in each one of these classes.
That's a great idea to really do that. What's the word for that? There's a jargon word for that.
Be like a vertical alignment or
vertical alignment. There you go. Thank you.
Hey, so,
any other thoughts, comments?
yeah, so
Hi.
I'm sorry, I'm running 2 meetings at the same time here, but I stepped out. So we just chose power standards at our school at Raleigh Junior High in February of 2019. And I got my teachers together and we looked at the state standards and we decided what are the things that kids really need to go from level to level, as well as what they're going to need beyond school. And when we did that, we also didn't make it a huge number. So when our new curriculum person come in, she said, we want 10. And I said, whoa, back up. 10 is too many sometimes, especially in a math course or an algebra course, whenever you need some foundations to go in, because sometimes, depending upon the level of the kid, 10 is way too many. So we went with like 6 in 8th grade in 8th grade, regular math, preparing for algebra. We went with like 8 in 7th grade going into 8th grade, and then algebra has their own standards. We used Herman Blau, who has a consulting firm that will walk your staff through it. It's not just, okay, this is what I think. He makes them think what it is and why and the justification behind it. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to end up with like things that are just there that, okay, that's fine. And then what I'm asking my teachers to do is to create a common formative assessment to go with that power standard, so they can also take that in an RTI time to help those kids master those things and focus that intervention time. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Monica, that is golden stuff. Are you willing to share that with other Missouri principals?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
Clark, send it to Clark, and Clark, you can get it out to folks. Is that kind of work is, and other schools will adapt, I'm sure, but you can save a whole bunch of folks a whole lot of time by sharing this wonderful work that you've done.
And also, when you throw out the mention of power standards to teachers, they're going to freak out. So there are multiple districts with them already posted that you can look at and get ideas. They're not the same wherever you go because every situation is unique. So don't just tell them power standards. Look at some school districts that have them. I know around here, Waynesville has them. I can get, Herman Blau is a consulting firm. He's a retired principal from Waynesville who does work. He can help you with that. I'm trying to think, Lee Summit, Parkview, some of the bigger districts already have them in place. Springfield, Willard.
Well, the big thing is not to reinvent the wheel.
No.
You know, if people have done the work in Missouri with Missouri standards, with similar, political and educational situation, that take advantage of that work. Don't start from scratch.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for ducking out of your other meeting and sharing your wisdom with us.
You're welcome. I'm learning how to clean a building at the same time I'm doing both. So this is definitely more interesting for me.
Good, good. So we are over time now, and I don't want to get in trouble with any of your unions out there or anything like that. But if there are any other thoughts or comments or questions, please chime in.
Well, Kim, our time is drawing to a close. I thought, would you like to make have a plug for your book?
Well, so this is the very, very best of the Marshall Memo articles from all 16 years. And actually book 2 is in production now, another 11 chapters. It's on Amazon, so go for it. And I'm working, I'm trying to make this available online, but in the meantime, it is our best thinking, my co-author and I, about what are the very best articles on assessment, on teacher evaluation, on social emotional learning, on time management, all those different topics. So I do highly recommend the book, but I'm totally biased. Thank you. It was a real pleasure working with you, and I hope this has been helpful. And I'm going to send the slides with the polling data. I'm sorry that those 2 questions didn't work. It's all about the robustness of the internet connection. But if any of you want advice on using Poll Everywhere, I do have a step-by-step guide, because it is complex to use, a step-by-step guide to have your teachers use it. Maybe you can use it in faculty meetings, and I can send it for a PC computer or a Mac computer. So just email me and I'll send you the step-by-step.
Also, a reminder that Kim will be back with us September 16th. A reminder that our next virtual event is next Wednesday, August 12th, reopening amidst uncertainty for school principals with Ed Council. So we look forward to next Wednesday. So with that, have a great rest of the week. Thanks again, Kim. And we will see you in a few weeks. Be safe, everyone.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Be well. Stay well.